A very good afternoon to this livecast, Reconnecting with Nature. A co-production between the cities of Amsterdam, Almere and Pakhuis de Zwijger, and part of the festival New European Bauhaus, the first edition of a festival which hopefully will be here for the coming years. It's an honor to be your moderator. I'm Pakhuis de Zwijger, and almost exactly a year ago, also here at Pakhuis de Zwijger, we discussed the launch of the new Bauhaus initiative. And it's connected to the European Green Deal, this massive, ambitious project to make Europe a greener place and therefore contributing to a more sustainable planet. But how do you create a new deal? What are the design principles? What are the aesthetics? What is the inclusiveness? And what is sustainability around such a big goal, audacious goal? Well, that's what we're going to discuss, and that's what's part of the new European Bauhaus is. Today, we're going to discuss our relationship with nature. And it's great to make a true reconnection with nature in our living space, in our urban spaces. And the festival is also a big festival day today at the Almere Floriade. You're a part of the pavilion. Welcome if you're sitting in the pavilion. In the coming hour, you will be joining us together with everybody who's watching the livecast and discuss this idea of the new European Bauhaus. So it's great to have you with us. And if you're at the pavilion or you're just watching from a different place on this planet, also please participate. If you have any questions, comments during the coming hour, I've here a little tablet. If you use Menti.com, I can see your comments and maybe I include it into the conversations that we are going to have. The Menti.com code is 85949707. So please use this code to go to Menti.com and then we'll include you into our conversations. So in the coming hour, we're going to discuss several initiatives, also initiatives from the city of Amsterdam and the city of Almere on how this reconnection with nature can take place. And therefore, I have my first two guests to my left to discuss this. To the left, Caroline Nevian, the CSO, the Chief Science Officer of the city of Amsterdam, and next to her, Sander van Voorn, Program Manager, Green and Healthy City Almere. And almost an hour ago, he was at the pavilion. So you take the pavilion atmosphere also here at Pakhuis de Zwijger to discuss this. Let me start with the two of you. Because the main idea behind the New European Bauhaus initiative is about aesthetics, sustainability, inclusiveness. If you make it more concrete for a city like Amsterdam, for a city like Almere, how do you make substance of these, well, beautiful terms, but also what do the terms mean in a city of Amsterdam, in a city of Almere? Sander.
I think in greener places, people like to go to green places more than to grey areas. Mm-hmm. So whenever you create more green spaces where you can, for instance, grow food with each other, I think it does something with inclusiveness. People try to connect again with each other. So working on and with nature is reconnecting people as well. And in the end, I think it's more beautiful and then it's more aesthetic as well.
It's nice. So you take this notion of greenness and green landscapes and green environments as such as being beautiful, as such connecting people, yes, as such being a very pleasant way to be there. Interesting. Yeah. Caroline, how do you approach this topic?
I agree very much with what you said, but I like to add on that. And a second very big argument is that we have climate change and we need to adapt our cities. And to adapt our cities, green is really fundamental. It's fundamental against urban heat, to keep the soil alive, so we have good air. So it's so we can store the water. So green is fundamental to a climate neutral city.
So actually a double-edged sword. I mean, it goes from two sides. It helps us to make these cities livable anyway because of all the things happening to our cities, but it also becomes a place, therefore, where we want to reconnect. Very nice. There is a pavilion, the Amsterdam-Almere pavilion at the Floriade. The theme is the voice of urban nature. How are these notions interwoven into the pavilion?
So whenever you go there, I was there 1 hour ago, as you said before. I think whenever you walk through the voice of urban nature, you get past all kinds of ways and manners how to become more sustainable in life. Mm-hmm. And I'm program manager sustainability at Almere, so I know how to become more sustainable. But I think many people in the world don't know or just want to know, but they don't know yet. So whenever you go to the voice of urban nature, you get inspired about how nature can help you with your problems at home.
Yeah, Colin?
And again, I agree.
Yeah.
And the other argument is that unless we give a voice to nature, we will not make climate change. We will drown. So there's a very fundamental reason why nature needs to have a voice, because stones and buildings are worth millions, and a piece of grass has no value at all.
Yeah.
So to change the debate about what is value, the voice of urban nature needs to be heard.
Yeah.
You're a great team, by the way, like making these connections. I mean,
Amsterdam and Almere like each other.
We need to meet up.
So let's explore this a bit more. Eh? So we can do it by a pavilion, giving it a theme, therefore making it discussable and make it approachable and make it more tangible. In the daily practice of a city and a city government, how do you make sure that grass becomes valuable? Maybe not economically valuable, but valuable in how we perceive the place. How do we do that?
So we have, in the Netherlands, we have now the omgevingsvisie, which means that we have changed the way we do urban spatial planning, regional planning. And the big difference is that we have a dialogue. The dialogue becomes fundamental to how we're going to decide things. It's quite interesting and also complex how it will work. We don't know yet. In this dialogue, nature needs to have a voice. Yeah. On the one hand, we have a lot of policy plans. We have a green vision, we have an energy transition vision, we have sustainable housing. So there are a lot of projects. Really,
there's no lack of vision.
Well, no, but also go to openresearch.com. Yeah. You see a lot of projects happening also.
Yeah.
.com, openresearch.amsterdam, sorry. I'm now lost my propos. I lost it.
Yeah, so we were discussing...
Oh, yeah. So, and in this dialogue, this voice of urban nature needs to get a voice. So you see that also judicially, for example, the ZOOP, so the new judicial forum that's just been launched last month in April in the New Institute in Rotterdam, where you can give rights, you get a speaker for nature. That can represent the nature, if it's a small park, can even be your balcony. So that the voice of urban nature is at the table. So it's interesting. You see that we make political visions, we have spatial planning practices that change, but also how we organize the dialogue and how nature is present at the table in the dialogue is really in a fast pace developing, and it also should develop really fast. Yeah. Because we need it yesterday and not tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think it's more or less the same, but we're working together with all our colleagues, of course, in the city of Almere. And there are 2,500 people working on a better city every day. And we are trying to integrate our sustainable vision into public space, into urban planning. So we are having lots and lots of meetups with our colleagues who are working on public space and, for instance, housing. So they are going to integrate this green energy into their work. And not only because it needs to, but it helps them as well. I think we have to build a lot of houses in the metropolitan area of Amsterdam. And Almere, we need to build 70,000 houses in the next 30 years. But we cannot do it whenever we are using concrete every time, because we have this nitrogen act. So we need to build with in a bio-based manner and with nature, therefore. Yeah. So we need to build with nature to get to become nearer other goals as well.
Yeah, can I add something? Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it's interesting that our colleagues at the Spatial Planning Department, they also have developed now a new methodology, which they call it the integral design methodology for public space, where you not only look at electricity and gas and internet cables, that's all in the ground. I mean, it's really a mess under the ground. But there also needs to be space for green and for the roots of trees.
Nice.
And they developed a new methodology because they argue we don't have the money to do it all at the same time. And they have calculated that in the next 4 years, in the next 10 years, we have to open up the floor of the streets, the ground of the streets, 4 times. We have no money, no time. So you have to develop, change how we design and how we implement these designs.
Yeah.
So it's also a scientific question.
Absolutely, because
how to develop this new methodology.
Because that's so interesting. Eh? When it comes to the connections we have to make the connection when it comes to planning and to be efficient and be smart about it. But what I also found interesting about this Bauhaus thinking is that how do you connect all these different things when it comes to inclusiveness, when it comes to the aesthetics, which are normally not part of our normal discourse, I would say. How do you put that in a place? And you mentioned the zoop, which is like a way of structuring the voice of nature into our thinking and in our decision making. How do you make sure that inclusiveness and aesthetics are also part of this mix?
Yeah. Well, I was yesterday, for example, at the Green Hub in Amsterdam Zuidoost. Yeah. And they are very clear. They say if you want to get any climate change happening and all the things we need to do for that, it starts with the social. So people need to be able to eat and to go to school and to live in a safe place before you start to think about sustainability. So climate challenges are social challenges. And in these social challenges, the voice of nature is very important. And it's also, like you said in the beginning, it's a way to connect people and to encourage people and to empower people. And you can really see that.
Yeah, sure.
There are quite a lot of green hubs, of buurthuizen, community centers. I can mention several, where you see that this combination of agendas, actually 1 + 1 is 3.
Yeah. 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 You have examples like this
well,
as well?
Well, I think, well, maybe not an example, but a reaction on your sayings. I think many municipalities have problems with sustainability because it costs a lot of money. Yeah. But whenever you can combine sustainability with other themes, like social, like economics, like, well, all kinds of themes. I think some municipalities want to work more on social dynamics than on sustainability, but whenever you are able to combine this as a municipality, you might become sustainable more as well.
Yeah. A final thing I would like to ask you, because there are visions, there are projects, it's becoming more and more concrete. We see things on the ground in our cities happening. Are there still strategic choices to be make to make this initiative faster, to create a certain momentum? What are the choices we are still facing? We get new local governments currently. What can we expect from that? What kind of maybe tough cookies still have to be?
Well, I think we need to talk with the people of our municipalities. Okay. Do they understand the issues on sustainability and inclusiveness? Do they have initiatives which we can facilitate? Because you are exactly what you were saying is that the people need to do it. I think governments are only there to facilitate. So whenever we invest, it needs to be an investment how people of municipalities become more sustainable and inclusive.
It's interesting. So you see, we have to make a connection between the ideas are there, the policies are there, but how can we make sure that on the ground and that the people are actually participating in it and think, okay, this is something which is for the good. Yeah. Caroline, what kind of choices do you see still to make?
I think that, well, as a city, we agree more or less, at least from the civil servant side, that the way we do things is not good enough to make the climate neutrality. Yeah. So you see, for example, that some of the departments where there's a lot of the maintenance being done or the new engineering is happening, they really are thinking, how can we change our methodology? Because we don't have the money and we don't have the time. Yes, we have a lot of people, but we have to hand tools to the people. So it's a very big challenge. Because
it's a complete rethink, no? It's a redesign of your,
Well, the linear, I mean, the way municipalities are built is linear processes. Yeah. Like the supply chain is also linear processes. Yeah. It has to go circular. Yeah. And I was speaking to someone yesterday, said it's not possible that the municipality becomes circular. But we have to do it anyway.
We have to do it anyway.
Well, so it's a very big challenge, but a very big social challenge in Amsterdam. Yeah, you have so many children, but we have also a whole youth in Amsterdam that really needs more possibilities to grow and to develop themselves. But we also have this huge climate challenge.
But
and for the companies, for example, it's also very hard because the uncertainty, it's not only that they don't know which products will prevail, they also don't know how the rules will develop, and they don't know how the money market will develop. So they are also in a very scary time. Yeah. I think we need to talk more about that because we have to encourage them to take the step to change. But it's very hard with so much uncertainty.
Wow. Yeah, and that's interesting. That's why you make such a good dream, because the two things come together. I mean, the municipalities can't do it alone. They need the companies, they need the citizens, and therefore only if we step up and we make the connection between all these actors within our city borders, then maybe it's possible to have this new way of approach, and therefore.
It was why Bauhaus is so nice. Yeah. Because in this success, design is fundamental. Yeah. So, and that was in the old days, and that is still today. So I work with many cities in Europe for my role as city science officer, and we all have the same conclusion, that unless we put design center stage, to be smart and open and inclusive, but also beautiful, so attractive, it will not work. So design has a very important role, and we are very happy with the new European Bauhaus for that reason.
Hear, hear, right?
Well, yes, true. And I think the last 10 years we did lots and lots of innovations on greening municipalities. But the thing is, we need to put it into our system. Yeah. And the change of our system is the innovation of the next 10 years, I think. Okay. So how do we get these great innovations on sustainability and greening cities into our cities?
Let's do it. Thanks so much, Caroline, and thank you, Sander.
Thank you.
Okay, and we go on with our next guests, and actually they are completely connected to this theme of how can we step up and how can we combine the different actors and how can these actors be approachable and part of the solution. My next guests are Matthea de Jong, director of the Tolhuistuin, Laura Burgers, assistant professor, University of Amsterdam, and expert on the rights of nature, Rein de Bakker, founder of Overtraders W, and architect of the Amsterdam-Almere pavilion at the Floriade. So you are there. And Anthony de Taranto, owner of GTP2 Architects, I have to think of Star Wars, and architect of the German pavilion at the Floriade. Welcome, great you are here. Laura, let's start with you, professor, assistant professor at the University of Amsterdam. We have just been discussing, Caroline also mentioned it, the ZOOP thinking, how can we make constructions of decision-making where nature becomes part of our thinking and part of our decision-making. It's very interesting that our cities are now really getting, are actually reconnecting in different ways. What do you see happening? Why is this happening, and what are the good examples to make this reconnection on the city level?
Yes, I think that's a great question, and I was very enthusiastic that ZOOP was mentioned. I think this is a wonderful initiative, but I thought it might be helpful to perhaps explain a little bit more how this works. Yeah. So this is actually a private initiative, so not per se one from a municipality, but a private initiative. Normally, when there is a company or another organization, there's a board that, is directing this organization. And the ZOOP model makes sure, and I cannot, you can explain it in a very difficult manner, but just to put it simply, they reserve a seat in the board for a representative of nature. Yeah. And in that way, indeed, there is a voice of nature being recognized in all the decisions that this organization can make, and it can be a for-profit organization. So there is now a for-profit farm that is intending to become a ZOOP. It can also be a non-profit, an NGO, or any other kind of, maybe even a public organization. Yeah. So it's an embodiment at the table of nature, and therefore it gets a voice. This is an extremely beautiful initiative, because in this way, indeed, non-humans, nature, if you like, get a voice in these organizations. And this can be done by private actors, so they do not have to wait until the government enacts legislation that would have the same effect. So indeed, you mentioned, I indeed do some research in rights of nature, and there are more and more countries in the world where these rights are recognized by the government. That is not yet the case in the Netherlands. No. And not we see it in New Zealand, we see it in Canada. Exactly, in Ecuador. And interestingly, and that brings us back, I think, to the urban environment, there are a lot of municipalities who recognize the legal personality or the rights of a certain area of nature in their city. It's interesting. So cities can actually be at the forefront of this thinking and of this new approach. Absolutely. So Amsterdam or Almere could, for example, say, okay, this park is now a legal person with his own rights, or these trees have their own rights that they can enforce in courts. That could be a possibility.
Okay, well, I think Sander and Caroline, they're sitting together now here in the audience, so maybe they will discuss it a bit further. How does this for you connect to the Bauhaus thinking? Because Caroline said it's so nice that it's actually being called Bauhaus because of this design approach. I mean, this is a new way of designing our decision making, no? And designing how we actually take into account much more than just a certain set of rights or
Exactly. So I really like that remark as well, that we have to rethink our design. And I think in a way that is really quickly also moving to a result stage. So the rights of nature, or the ZOOP model, it's a procedural measure you take. You don't say, this is the outcome we need to achieve. You say, these are the voices that need to be heard. And the thought is, the idea is that if you hear those voices, that you will also achieve other outcomes. And one of those outcomes, I think, indeed, is other design that is not only focused at the needs of us humans, but also of those of other beings in this world.
Mattea, let's go to you. Tolhuistuin, you're the director. Tell us a little bit about Tolhuistuin for people who know it.
It's a beautiful place.
It is.
Up on the northern side of the IJ. It used to be the research lab of Shell, and we thought it's a really good reminder to use this beautiful place as a catalyzer for change towards a more sustainable and just future. What is different compared to other cultural spaces in Amsterdam, it has a big garden. It has different buildings, but it also has a big garden, so it's also a really nice kind of, area. And last October, we thought it would be nice, because we work a lot in Amsterdam North, and we always remind each other, like, North is the place where anything can happen, but everything that happens in North can happen everywhere in the Netherlands. So what if we declare Amsterdam North as a natural area, and radically think differently about the city nature? So that's what we did in October.
So you said, okay, North is a natural reserve, actually. What kind of intention were you thinking of doing this?
Two different things, but sometimes you just have to make a statement.
Sure, yeah.
And then it sets things into motion before, instead of the other way around.
And
right?
it did.
Yeah. So we made a party. We put up a sign, a banner. We made a manifesto. It was signed by 100 organizations in Amsterdam North, from really grassroots level cultural spaces, but also bewonersinitiatieven, inhabitants groups, and a very diverse group of people. And they all felt the importance that we have to see our city environment also as a natural environment, and take life as a center of any decision that we make, like the ZOOP. Is also one of the procedures to do that.
Because that's so interesting. It changes your thinking about an area, right? I mean, if you perceive it as a natural reserve, this whole new metaphor comes up, and how you approach the region or the area which you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rock landscape, we think. So Amsterdam North, it has more different kinds of trees than the Veluwe. It has more different plants than Texel. So why not see our city, Amsterdam North, as a natural area? And the intention is to start also research about it, and to see if we can, so I'm curious what you think about it, to see what kind of legal things that we can organize to preserve it.
I hear ZOOP coming up. And lastly, and then we go to Reinder, and then we have a continuous conversation with the four of us. And you said to yourself, you also want a response, you want something happening. What's one highlight of a response that you, that's so great that now that we changed this thinking, this pops up, or this was...
Well, this is one response. So this was released in April. Het Wilde Noorden. So it's a city... it's a
the Wild North?
The Wild North. It is a nature guide, a city guide through nature. So it's a bit of a reminder, like, you don't have to go to Indonesia or to whatever place, just go on adventure in your own environment. So is more on the educational part than the research part, but it's a really...
It's really nice when you're saying the more plants than Texel. I mean, it's so fascinating already how you can frame this, and it's great. Yeah, cool. Reinder, architect of the Amsterdam-Almere pavilion in the Floriade. We've been discussing quite a lot already about nature inclusiveness, giving nature a voice. How can we see this back in the pavilion, and how is your approach to creating this pavilion?
Hopefully you can find it on many layers in the pavilion.
Yeah, okay.
We said, first of all, we said the whole plot of the pavilion, we had 900 square meters, is nature, is a garden, but also the whole plot is a building. The whole plot is also exhibition. And that's actually like in small how I believe on a bigger scale it should be. So Amsterdam North can be nature. Yeah. We can say actually everything is nature. Yeah. We really make the boundaries between what is nature and what is city and what is countryside and what is... And I believe we should combine this more. So what we did, we built it from local materials, locally sourced, wood from trees that were dead, for example, by disease or things like that, but also like an old school building which was demolished, and then the roof structure we took. So wood from local, local sources, Almere and Amsterdam. Yep. And also, for example, the paint is from flax. It's linseed oil, which is sourced locally here near Schiphol, because the goose don't like the flax, and they don't fly in the entrance of the...
Talking about nature.
Talking about nature, yeah. So there's stories, many stories. I can't expand more behind all the materials from this pavilion. And that's, I think, what we believe is that you have to make more closed loops, local loops, and that you kind of understand where your material is from. Because it's so weird when lots of architects make green facades, for example. That's very trendy. It looks like a very green building, but we forget that we need lots of concrete to carry all this heavy green facades. And the concrete we take away from maybe 300, 400, 500, 600 kilometers far away, and we bring it here, and then we make a sustainable building. But how sustainable is that? Yeah. Is it? I think real sustainability is about closing the loops and incorporate nature everywhere. Yeah.
And you said something very interesting, that your approach with the pavilion is also something, is also a metaphor, or also something you want to see on a broader scale within a city region or suburban areas. Could you elaborate on this? How can this type of layered approach, but also closing the loop, how do you think it can also impact the built environment in the coming years?
So on the material level, for example, I think we can find better local materials like wood, and that we should now, if we build out of wood, we mainly do it for a villa on the countryside, but we can also make cities out of wood. So hopefully this is like a start of it.
Okay, and that's the material side. And when it comes to, which is also the voice of nature, by the way, and when it comes to how you use space, and how you...
Yeah, exactly. So for example, we had a green roof here, which is not accessible, and it's super lightweight green roof. So it can be actually on every roof. It's just boxes which you can carry and bring on the roof, and they're not too heavy. This is only the roof. Yeah, it's here on the right. It's only accessible for bees and butterflies, and not for people, for example.
Yeah, nature only. Well, we're part of nature as well, but I mean, kind of. Yeah. Okay. Nice. Anthony, architect of the German pavilion at the Floriade. Great, you can be with us. The theme is growing a community, gemeinsam für eine grüne Zukunft, as the theme of the German pavilion. Could you elaborate on that theme and how it's connected to your approach to how you designed the pavilion?
Yeah, the starting point really is all about imagination. We're in the imagination business, and we'd like to have the pavilion say to the visitors, imagine a city that can produce its own food. Imagine a city that can create its own energy. Imagine a city that will clean itself, that is so green that the sound gets absorbed, the dust gets absorbed, and it cools itself down. all these things are possible. We know that, technically we all know that, but how do you communicate that to the general public? And this is what the German Pavilion is all about. We're trying to show, inside we have an exhibition which is highly interactive. It was created by a creative agency in Glück, I have to mention them here, in Berlin. It's all about interacting, using the gamification and infotainment as very classical tools to get people engaged and interact with exhibits, and then in a very light-hearted way learn about these quite complicated interlocking subjects and themes. They have little wristbands so they can collect points. At the end, it gets all put into a main show, and they come together, and you learn that everybody with a little bit of knowledge can contribute and do good and change the city. So even if you just have a balcony, a flower box, or a solar panel, all these little things add up. But if everybody pulls together, then we can really make a difference. And I think that's what it's all about. And the German Pavilion, if you look at the structure, it's all wood. Of course, we had to make it all wood, which was a tricky move. Last year there was no wood to be found anywhere, so we had to pay double. But anyway,
yeah, there's kind of a shortage, isn't there? Yeah.
And I'm envious of Ryan just saying we had a light roof only for bees, but our roof is accessible. Yeah, we wanted to show this is the city. You can see a structure which is supposed to be growing, and it's not finished. Only last week we added rotors. Wind generators. So we want to show it's still growing, it's always, it's never finished, and the roof garden shows you how it can be done. Everything is in wood. There's a 1 ton per square meter roof garden up there, but it's all constructed in wood, and also including the foundations. We're very proud to say we have no concrete. Everything gets
well done.
Recycled.
And it's interesting because how your approach also connects to this discussion of we can't do it alone. It can only be done, this climate change and this energy transition, if we all forces are combined. And it's also where you want to create awareness, make people part of the solution instead of just being bystanders. Another question for you, I think is interesting. So what kind of perspectives did you take into account when it comes to, creating this structure? Because there's so many voices to be given, so many things you want to pinpoint when it comes to awareness being part of the solution. What was for you an important perspective to take into account?
Well, the perspective really was, what does the city of the future look like? And the answer was almost obvious. It has to entail a lot of green, it has to entail a lot of materials that we can regrow, like wood. In Europe, we can produce our own wood. Yep. And we have to avoid all the materials that are not so good environmentally, as Rainer just now mentioned, concrete, unfortunately. It's very difficult for architects. Our hands are tied without concrete, but we're going to get used to it, and we'll find a way. Yeah. That was the inspiration. Yeah, it has to be a light structure, transparent, smells good when you go there. Yeah. All these little things. Anybody who's been to the tropics knows in a 40-degree day, under a tree, it's 10 degrees cooler. It's so simple and so obvious.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But we know, having built this thing, how technically challenging it is. Yeah. And you need maintenance and you need financial support.
Yeah, exactly, because you also need assignments and people who give the assignment who are actually in favor of this and are want to be your partner in finding the right solutions, right? I mean, it's a Floriade that makes sense, but how often is it in our urban space that we can have these initiatives? Yeah, interesting. A question for you all, and who wants to start is fine, because I feel here the main theme is how can we connect people, they become part of the solution, and that nature become part of the solution. What do you think are important triggers for people and for nature to become part of being this solution? Because we have so many great examples here. What is in your practice the learning where can we step up to make this actually work and make this and create more impact? Who goes first?
Yeah, I can perhaps start. Yeah. So, sure. Well, I do think it's very important because earlier in this nice gathering, it was said that we need also to think about the social dimension before moving to the environmental dimension. But I actually do think we really need a realization that it's also the other way around. Mm-hmm. So we cannot be social without being ecologically sustainable. Mm-hmm. Because if we look at all the impacts indeed of climate change, of deforestation, of lack of biodiversity, that will have such huge social consequences. Well, only one example is, of course, the floods last summer close by here in Germany, in Belgium and the Netherlands.
Absolutely.
And that is just but one, that's only one example of so many. So I do think this is a realization that we need to embrace way more in our thinking, and to get at that realization, I think actually almost any method can work, because this is a collaborative effort, a paradigm shift in all of our thinking. So I am a firm believer that everyone can do their own small contribution, and that all those contributions have some merit.
Let me rephrase my question, because now I think it's more pinpointed now with your answer, and maybe it's interesting for all four of you. What keeps us from doing this on an individual level, or maybe from a system level? But what's keeping us now to make this connection between the social and the ecological? Because maybe if we know what keeps us from doing it, it's easier to break it up or redesign it and do something else. Maybe that's a nice final question for all four of you. Do we want to continue on this, or?
Well, I don't have a very good answer, I'm afraid. So
we're exploring.
I think it's just that we are used to another way of thinking, and it takes really a lot of time to change habits and way of thinking. And I think you know way more.
I think it's
interesting, because from architecture practice has a certain history, and now you also try to shape it. No?
So I think it should be on all different levels, what you say. So it's from taking the tiles out of your garden till changing building industry, which is still one of the most unsustainable businesses on earth. And so that's also, it's on so many levels. It's also on with laws and things like that. So it's very complex. It's not one thing.
If I may add one other thing, so I indeed always look at the law, but law is responsive to society. So in the law, we materialize our beliefs of what is good, collective beliefs. So they always come a little bit later. So for the laws to become more sustainable, we first need to create this more sustainable thinking, if you like.
And maybe sometimes bypass the laws or just ignore them a little bit, no? Some revolutionary thinking here, no?
I cannot give this as a recommendation, but of course there are activists who also deliberately break the law, civil disobedience.
Civilized civil obedience, then make it. No, but Reiner, you say something very interesting. How do you, we have to pull many strings at the same time. What's the main string you can pull at as an architect? What's in your power to be part of this solution or this new way?
Well, I can only say what we do is what we do. We mainly make temporary buildings, because when you make a temporary thing, it's a bit more easy to experiment and learn from these experiments and bring them to the permanent building industry. And we have some projects we did before where that really happened. So that this experiment we did for a temporary, I mean, you can fail when you make a temporary building. But not when you make a permanent building. And I think actually everything, also a permanent building, is temporary. So everything is temporary, but we forget about that. So, but for now, if you make a temporary structure like this for the Floriade, we can learn and bring this to the building industry and to show it.
That's great. The importance of experimenting, failing, and failing in a good way, because we learn from the failure and therefore...
I see that, but there's also a lot of interest from building industry. I have a lot of tours from big contractors. I have to show this pavilion because they are really interested. And it's also very difficult for them because the concrete world is so incorporated in their world. It's not so easy to say we don't use any concrete. It's not a step you can take in one day. So.
I get it. Anthony, are you pulling the same strings as Reiner, or some different ones?
Well, you're saying what's keeping us from, doing a new building like we did is, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's straightforward. We know what we have to do. But the problem is that, of course, cities are built up already. They're there. And how do you work with existing buildings? Right now we're in a 100-year-old building which was transformed into an event center or something like that. And this is where it becomes tricky and complicated and very technical. How do you turn existing building fabric into the 21st or 22nd century, ready for the 22nd century? That requires technical knowledge. And the community, the general, first we're educating the public. I think we're getting there. Everybody's got the idea, you know, that we got to do something. But also us lot, the designers and the planners or whoever pull the strings and make the decisions, we have to do a lot of learning as well. And it is getting very technical and scientific so that we know how to do what to an old existing building. But the information is there and it's all there. We have to educate ourselves a bit more and then find the means, the material money, I'm afraid, to do it all. It's
also just more complex. I mean, lots of these materials you can't find just order online. Lots of materials you can order just online and then they are delivered tomorrow. Well, maybe in these days it takes a bit longer, but so it's also this, these new ecosystems. It's not so, I mean, the knowledge is there, but it's not like this, the loops are completely closed. So for a contractor, it's really hard to do good, actually.
Anthony, was it so interesting? We're now at the new Bauhaus festival, but there's also a more personal connection with Bauhaus from your side, no?
Oh, I was mentioning, my grandfather was a German architect in the 1920s in Berlin.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of him. He did a much better job than I did. But
well, no, because that will be a follow-up question. We're now discussing new Bauhaus. Yes. Do you feel part of this? I mean, are we talking about a new movement?
First of all, I think it's fantastic how the Bauhaus movement is still modern. It's timeless, isn't it?
Sure.
100 years later, or 101, it's still. We all got a piece at home. It's stuff we like. And I can only hope that the new Bauhaus, which is being kicked off now, which is that in 100 years from now, you know, we won't live, maybe, but I don't think so, that we will have done something similar. You know, that I think by then it'll become everyday, normal, routine thinking, just like we accept Bauhaus now, not as revolutionary, but a great classic. The new green movement will, in 100 years' time, I hope, if we get it right and do it worldwide. So I think
that will be something to be proud of as well. Huh?
Yes, that's a very good thing to have your Bauhaus, because it will give you a 100-year perspective.
Okay. I hope also, can I? A small thing also, because there were these three things like aesthetic, sustainability, and we forget inclusiveness. We forget this aesthetic, so we also to develop a new aesthetic around sustainable building. So we kind of, and I think that's very important. That it, in the past, sometimes sustainable buildings looked a bit like sustainable buildings, and I think we
no pun intended.
It didn't look always very good, and I think it is very important to think about new aesthetics so that we really like the things we build and that we maintain the things we build, like Bauhaus.
Well, that's interesting, because Matteo, we go lastly to you, and then we wrap up, because we have some new guests, extra guests. What's interesting about what Reiner says is also, if we talk about a nature reserve, we also have a different connection to it. We perceive it differently. We become more, how do you say that? We care more for it. This whole new way of approaching it becomes. How will you further elaborate on this thinking also, maybe in future projects, or because that's of course what the power of the total design is.
Yeah, we hope to have this as a starting point for a multiple-year project where we will combine art, citizen science, and science. Focus on both research, legal measurements, and education. Education, I mean also like the aesthetics and the art part of it, because I think that these three things, the research and the monitoring, the legal boundaries that we work in, and also the education and the mindset that needs to change is the three.
I like that. And could we lastly elaborate a bit on this education? What are you thinking of, or what can you be your role as Tolhuistuin in this? Because you're talking about future generations, you're talking about something crucial, not only future generations, but generations in general.
Yeah. Of course, from Tolhuistuin we do lots of projects in Amsterdam North. We do lots of programs and things like that. But what I love to have is like a group of young people that we can really educate as nature reserve boswachter people, you know, so that they are really at the forefront of educating their parents, educating their friends and everybody they know
That's great. Forest caretakers in our cities, because our cities are nature reserves as well.
Yeah, but it also, there's also, I think that if the city government knows that this is like one of the vital keys that they need to work on, then there will be money to do that.
Absolutely.
Because that's always one of the problems, right? To make it really happen. And yeah, so I hope that this is also something that policymakers of Amsterdam will hear.
I will make sure it will. So take care of that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Laura, Reinder, Mattea, and Anthony. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we go to the last part of our Inspiring Hour, part of the festival of the new Bauhaus thinking. And we have some special guests, because in a week time, there is the Open Groendag. And there are certain activities on June the 19th, and we're going to present 3 of these activities to you, also to make sure that you will be part of the 19th of June at the Open Groendag as well. Well, let's showcase 3 of them. We have 2 guests here, and there is 1 guest in the Zoom, so you will see them in the live cast later on. It's Yvonne Mondeman, it's Mark van Heukelum on Zoom, and Roel Schoenmakers here sitting next to me. Let's do it like this, that you first tell something about all your 3 initiatives, 2 here live and 1 via the Zoom, and then we elaborate a bit further if there are connections, if there are no connections, and what you think of the discussion maybe in the last hour. That could be interesting as well. Let's start with you, Yvonne Mondeman, City Vineyard, wijn van Brett.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's the official title.
Yeah.
We started this project in 2016. And we created the City Vineyard really close by to the station Sloterdijk, in a very dull concrete area.
Yeah, here in Amsterdam.
Here in Amsterdam, yeah. And we set it up as a community project. So that means that we have 750 vines, so it's really small for us, for a vineyard.
But you're winemaking in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, yeah. And 70 people, they can join us. So they lease 10 vines, and they join us for the whole year. So we do together the maintenance of the vineyard and the winemaking, and of course there's also time for tastings and other fun.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And what's happening on the June the 19th?
Yeah, we have a so-called open day.
Yeah.
So we just open up the vineyard. People can come by and we will show them around. And of course, at the end, there are some tastings.
Nice. And how do you end up near Sloterdijk? What's the logic of that place?
Yeah, we wanted to make the city greener. And Sloterdijk was a typical area where projects were realized for only 10 years. Oh, yeah. So there were chances to just do something like that. And we thought it was an excellent location to make the city greener and to make it more attractive and to add to the biodiversity and to make a social place there, because also this whole area is changed into a living area and it needs some attractiveness.
Oh, it's developing so rapidly without the housing projects. It's crazy. Yeah. Okay, let's go to you, Mark, in Zoom. Almere Hout Urban Forest. What's that about? Are you there? No? Okay, then we go first to Roel and then we come back to Mark later on. Roel Schoenmakers, Cascoland, love your name. Fruit Garden van Moerkerke. What's that about?
Well, I am one of the initiators of the Art and Design Collective Cascoland, and for over 15 years our mission statement says that we try to work towards a more social and ecological society, which are some of the themes that I hear back.
Yeah, rings a bell. Yeah.
Fruittuin van Moerkerke, the fruit orchard van Moerkerke, is actually a place where we're trying to put this in practice. We've been setting up green projects in neighborhoods in West and New West of Amsterdam for the last 10 years. 2 years ago, we started a fruit orchard in public space, which is built, maintained, and kept by residents of the neighborhood, together with people in my collective. Mm-hmm. The yield of the fruit garden, together with the yield of the neighborhood gardens that we have, and the surplus food from the market Plein 4045, we make conserves from it in the fruit garden. So there's a lot of social interaction happening there. People are part of this green maintenance scheme of the the fruit orchard. And what is important, that is that we are now negotiating with the city, with the municipality, to start these kind of projects more in public spaces, where there's shared ownership over the public spaces and a shared maintenance with, together with the government. In Amsterdam, we have actually at the moment 2 systems. Either the municipality is maintaining the public green, or you enter into a self-maintenance contract, and then as a citizen you are responsible for the total maintenance of these public spaces. We think we should go to a hybrid system where the municipality takes part of their responsibility and citizens are allowed to become part of this maintenance and also achieve ownership over our public spaces.
That's a great way of thinking. That's way more collective than saying, well, you're responsible, and there's always something going wrong, right? I mean, yeah. And
there's the big problem we are facing now, that Caroline Nerian today was expressing some of the visions of our municipality. It's very hard on a local level, in the district municipality level, to negotiate these kind of collaborations with the civil servants in place now that are responsible for the maintenance of public green, because to them it's a new experimental area.
Yeah, and it's about liability, you know. So there are all these things going on, of course. But the question becomes, how can we take a step further and be liable as a collective instead of that we blame just one. Interesting.
Exactly.
Great. Let's listen. I just saw Mark, and there you are.
Perfect.
Mark.
Hi.
Yes,
Good
great
afternoon.
to have you. Although Almere Hout Urban Forest.
Yeah, exactly. We are very busy working on developing the Almere Hout, a very large forest area below Almere city. And Almere is growing, and it's growing all around the forest. And we are developing Almere Hout to be the largest city forest of Holland. And it's a very fascinating
location. Sounds very like Almere, this ambitious, audacious.
Yeah, we got big
goals.
ambitions, exactly. And
like
the best thing I like about this ambition is that we really want to fade the borders between the forest and the city. It has to become one. That has a lot of challenges, of course, because you have wild nature and a lot of human activity. So this is why we are working with these different forest types we are developing. And we would love to show people more on what we are working with. So during this day, the open dag, the Groendag, you can come. We have interactive presentations, and we go on a walk with several forest rangers to see what the forest looks like now, what we are trying to do. And our philosophy is that, well, I like the saying, if you tell me, I will forget. If you show me, I will remember. But if you involve me, I will understand. And that's what we are trying to do these years, the following years, to really get people involved and to understand the benefits of nature, how you can incorporate it in your daily life. And that's what we are working for. So we are hoping we can share a little bit of this philosophy with people joining us that day.
Great. You said something very intriguing. There's no boundary or a boundaryless park and city. The city and the park are one. Could you elaborate a bit on this? How you're absolutely right. By seeing it, you remember it. But maybe you can still use some words to how do you vanish these boundaries then?
Well, that's a very interesting challenge, and one way we try to reach this is to see if we can really connect the forest to other green structures within the neighborhoods surrounding the forest. Mm-hmm. So there is a direct connection between the center of the forest all the way to the green yards of the houses in the neighborhoods. So we're trying to build these connections. That's one way to do it physically, but another way is to really involve people in how we maintain the forest, in monitoring the forest, in activities you can do in the forest, and also copy these things also into the surrounding neighborhoods. And one very specific thing which we want to open during this day is we have built a mobile piece of forest which will travel around in the Almere Hout, but also into the neighborhoods. It's a mobile piece of Almere Hout. And this way we can go into the city and show people something about the beauty of the Meerhout as a welcoming to actually come into the forest. So all these ways we try to fade these boundaries, because I think a classical view is that you go to a natural area to in your free time to enjoy nature, and I think it's a necessity and maybe a right to be able to enjoy nature in every part and every aspect of your life. So that's what we try to accomplish here.
Okay, great. Oh, I forgot to ask you what you're doing on the open day itself.
Well, we are open, but we are open all year round because it's public space.
Yeah,
but
okay.
On that day, in one of the greenhouses, Fatima Zora Aidini, she's a lady from the neighborhood who develops her own teas, will open up a garden of tea, and people are welcome to visit into the orchard and to roam around the house where we have herb gardens, and we are digesting old bread and building new bread on biogas. But at the same time, you can also have a cup of tea with Fatima Zora at her garden of tea.
Nice. What I found interesting about this hour, and that will be my final question also for you, is that the theme was reconnecting with nature. And what we heard is by reconnecting with nature, we actually become more human. We become more, we become better, we become more connected. I mean, this is my words. I would be interested in your words, because this is what you're doing. You're putting a vineyard in the city. You are using all this food around, and therefore people are reconnecting with each other. What happens to people if they get connected with nature within our city boundaries, or when the boundaries between the park and the city is vanished? Who would like to start on that?
Well,
yeah, Roel, yeah.
Human beings, we are nature.
Yeah.
You know, so over the last maybe 100, 150 years, we've distanced ourselves a little bit of nature. Mm-hmm. Religious beliefs have made us think that we stand above nature, but we don't. And I think it's just natural that people feel better in a natural environment. Mm-hmm. But people also like the city, the social life. So if we can combine the green and the social in our cities, I think the livability in our cities will improve.
It's nice. So actually we're becoming more equal with nature, and hopefully it also has effects on how we are treating humans as with each other, and more in a more equal manner, which will be a social output.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is also really happening in the Vineyard.
Yeah.
Because people, they come, they just like the idea, and they would. Some of them are interested in wine. Some of them would like to do the maintenance of the vineyard. But they come from all different places in Amsterdam, but also outside, and they just feel very happy. They feel the ownership. They just wanna. Oh, yeah. They just wanna own the place, and of course we are trying to give them as much space as possible. And what they tell us is that they connect with other people. Yeah. The other people. That's always what we hear, because due to the way we are organizing ourselves with social media and stuff, we are constantly in our own bubble. Yeah. If you just meet somebody new, having a totally different story, and then you try to connect and you try to understand somebody, really understand somebody, and that brings a lot of happiness, but also understanding each other.
Yeah, and you say it's something very important. I think ownership, feeling agency over your environment is very empowering. So I think it also enlightens your life and becomes more more integrated in your society.
Yeah, people always tell it also at the coffee when they are at their work, that they've been working in their vineyard. So it really becomes it just has a special place in their life. Yeah, nice. And that should be.
Mark, lastly, what are the effects you are hoping when people become part of nature again, as they always were, but somehow in the last 150 years something happened?
Well, I think as a species, we grew up in nature for tens of thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. So I think our physical and mental well-being is developed within these natural rhythms, natural smells, natural colors, and everything. So I think it's very normal that we feel so at home in nature, and I think we've lost this because due to all these economical developments, which has brought us a lot of good. But I think we forgot that our home still is the natural area. So if we can combine those two and are able to enrich our living environment again with nature, with greenness, with ecology, I think we can. It really helps us to become less stressful and enjoy our living area again.
Absolutely, and with this we also end, because Mark, you said also something interesting when it comes to this well-being. We've been discussing the European Green Deal, this ambitious project of how Europe becomes a more sustainable continent, a more sustainable union. The Bauhaus initiative, the new Bauhaus initiatives, is a way of approaching this with important principles, and in the end, it's all about maybe our well-being, being part of this planet, our well-being as human citizens, and being part of communities. And we saw some beautiful projects today about how these communities actually can empower people. Let's keep on doing this. I wish you a great day at the Floriade, because the festival is still going on at the Floriade. So have fun, be inspired, be empowered, and I hope to see you soon next time also here on the livecast of Pakhuis de Zwijger. Thanks, and have a great weekend.